You're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Chief Executive of Total Politics Group, Mark Wallace, and crossbench peer and former Paralympic legend, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. They'll be with me from now until just before midnight. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. And we'll start with the Financial Times. Its headline, Mandelson dismissed as Britain's US ambassador over Epstein links. With the Prime Minister being forced to sack Mandelson, The Guardian says he is now facing questions over his judgment. Lord Mandelson is said to feel ill-treated by the Prime Minister. That's according to The Times. The Eye says Lord Mandelson's exit leaves weakened Starmer facing wrath of Labour. The Express calls the Prime Minister weak for the Mandelson fiasco, in their words. And the Mail picks up on the warnings the Prime Minister received before appointing Lord Mandelson, which he apparently ignored. The Daily Telegraph says Sir Keir Starmer will face the fury of MPs over the affair, and it all ends in Keir's, is the Metro's headline. The Mirror has the same story, saying Lord Mandelson is being sent home in disgrace. While The Sun pictures the man the FBI says is a person of interest, branding the image the face of evil as the manhunt for Charlie Kirk's killer continues. And The Star leads with the former Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker saying he is never going back to the BBC. Mark Wallace and Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson are here with me now. Let's get straight to it. And as we heard there, Mark, all the front pages really are touching on Lord Mandelson's sacking. It all ends in Keir's, says the Metro. And really, this is a headache Keir Starmer didn't want, especially coming so soon after Angela Rayner quitting, or being fired, rather, last week.
Yes, I mean, it's, 10 days since the Prime Minister did that interview in which he told the government, this is a new phase. This is phase 2 of my government. I think it's fair to say it's been a pretty rough, subpar few days for that period. If this is what phase 2 looks like, I think MPs will be thinking about phase 3. What's really striking about this is it is a headache for the Prime Minister. It's one that he brought on himself to a large degree, and it's one that he's allowed to linger. And the fact is that, fine, we've learned a lot more and new shocking things in recent weeks and then in recent days about Peter Mandelson's links with Jeffrey Epstein. The release or the leak, the obtaining of these emails suggests it's getting worse. But these links were known about, at least in very broad brush terms, before his appointment to this role. I think there were lots of reasons why he was, frankly, could be a well-chosen ambassador. I always assumed he'd get on much better with Donald Trump than people assumed. As it's turned out, they've got a bit more in common than even we might have assumed. Unfortunately, that might turn out to be the problem. But the fact is that these controversial matters, these controversies, were known about. I think it was to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, to lose one government job in the middle of an embarrassing scandal might be considered a misfortune. To lose 3 starts to look rather worse. And this is something the Prime Minister has, in that sense, brought on himself.
Tanni, I'm going to correct myself because Angela Rayner did, of course, resign. She wasn't fired, but it became pretty untenable by that point, certainly. Lord Mandelson has been fired. He certainly has previous when it comes to losing jobs in government. What's your take on this?
I think whenever you read part of the headline that says you have full backing, that's not what any politician or anybody wants to hear, because that usually means that your days are numbered, doesn't it? I think, so much of the time in public life, we're told about the Nolan principles and, the 7 principles of public life. And you have to be standing and transparent and all those different things. And that seems to have gone out the window, and especially as we're starting to learn more about what the security services are meant to have said about, they flagged it. These high-profile appointments, have to be done pretty quickly when you come into power. But you've got to think about the consequences of it, and it feels like it was just a bit rushed. I get why they did it. He's a charming... I live in the northeast of England. I remember coming back to Darlington when I on a train. He got off the train. There was quite a lot of homophobic abuse that was shouted at him. He just unbelievably dealt with it. Yeah. He's quick on his feet. He's got a lot of charisma. But there's got to be more to it than that. Did you see much in the Lords before he became US ambassador? Not a lot. I mean, we have a few that don't. Yeah. Mostly because they're doing other things. But no, it's You know, that probably gets us into laws reform and lots of other things.
Well, you might be seeing more of him soon. You never know.
We might be.
He's got a job to do. Let's have a look at the I front page. Mandelson exit leaves weakened Starmer facing the wrath of Labour. Mark, Tanni mentioned there these appointments happen fairly quickly after a government comes to power. Before we came on, we were talking about Lady Roxburgh, Karen Pierce, who was the US ambassador previously, doing a good job and well respected across the spectrum, and well respected by in the US as well. It makes you wonder why, given what apparently the government knew about Mandelson and the security services issues there, why they didn't just stick with her?
Well, and she was widely thought to have done an extremely good job before Washington, D.C. at the United Nations as well, through the Ukraine crisis and rallying support there. It's true that these decisions by prime ministers early after coming to power have to be made rapidly. But this is a decision that ordinarily brings someone who's not a Foreign Office diplomat, a fine thing to do, but it's quite unusual. It does take quite a lot of a forethought, a lot of insistence, a lot of commitment, not just from the Foreign Secretary, but from Downing Street. And that's where this is increasingly tracing its way back to. A lot of people around the country will be baffled as to why someone finding out that one of their friends was first accused and then convicted and then sent to prison of the kind of offences that Jeffrey Epstein committed, would then continue writing to them being their friend. Frankly, it's just as baffling as to why a government that had plenty of time in the polls to foresee that it was going to get into power, that everybody gave a lot of thought to this decision, thought this was OK without looking at the downsides. But then even over the last week, has stuck with it for so much longer when the writing was on the wall.
That is the question. Angela Rayner did resign. Lord Mandelson was sacked. He himself said in an interview with Harry Cole of The Sun yesterday, there's more to come out, it's going to be embarrassing. Why didn't he at that point think maybe the best thing for, not him, but the government would be to go and resign? I do wonder sometimes,
that type of person that goes into politics. So actually, if I look at my previous career in sport, there's an amazing guy called Steve Peters who works with...
Oh, yes. The chimp paradox.
The chimp paradox.
Yes.
Works with elite athletes and people in prison for mass murder. So I think sometimes you need to have a certain amount of ego to go into politics and to do this role. And maybe he just thought that it would be OK.
It would blow over.
Yeah, and, I don't think Parliament is a very happy place at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of... They're not new anymore. MPs who weren't expected to get in. I spoke to a couple, a couple of months in, and they were saying they didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't necessarily feel they had loads of support. Yeah. They're being bombarded with things. And for them, this is just another thing. And we're trying to get through tons of legislation.
Yes.
Stuff is just being chucked at us. And this is just another layer which makes it not a happy place.
We will touch upon that later. Let's move on to the front page of tomorrow's Financial Times. And death shooting rocks divided nation. This is, of course, the story of the shooting dead of Charlie Kirk. Someone still on the run. We know they have recovered a weapon in the vicinity. But the bigger picture here, Tanni, I mean, you talk about disenfranchisement in Parliament, the disenfranchisement in the US with political violence, of which there's been a lot, not least the attempted assassination, of course, of Donald Trump on more than one occasion. It beggars belief as to what is happening there, really.
It's really quite scary. I mean, we were chatting before about the cancel culture that exists in the UK. That is one thing. But, this is absolutely, terrifying. The ease with which you can get guns, that you can get close to people. I mean, I didn't quite connect when I first heard about it because, he's someone that I'd sort of watched a bit on social media, was watching interaction with students, sort of dipped in and out of. Fascinating about, how those debates go and, these, young, fresh-faced university students who, are so, clear that they have these views and are not used to challenge. But this is just, we talk in this country about, the pressure on you as a political person, whether you feel you can have a voice, whether you feel safe. Actually, this is really terrifying for freedom of speech in the US. Or anybody who has an opinion on anything. I mean, it's absolutely abhorrent. Mark, the Sun's front page says the face of evil in relation to the Charlie Kirk story. This is the image of the, a person of interest, they're calling them, the FBI, but that is the image the FBI has put out. Let's not discuss that too much. What is interesting, as Tanni said, you're aware of on social media, a lot of young people in the UK were aware of him
on social media. Certainly it was a big deal on TikTok. It's amazing how his rhetoric, his arguments carried across the Atlantic. They all know who he is now, especially now he's been killed.
Yes, and Charlie Kirk made his name by doing something quite simple, but quite unusual in the modern age, which is that he didn't just preach to the choir. He decided to go and surround himself by people whom he didn't agree with, and invite people who disagreed with him to challenge him, to debate him. And as Tanni says, you can see in some of those videos, and I think a lot of people, even if they didn't realise it was Charlie Kirk they were watching, will have seen them. You can see that quite often what he's confronted by is somebody who's standing up convinced they've got a smack-down, absolute zinger of a line, there's no way... And they seem taken aback when they get a calm, cogent reply. And that shouldn't be controversial, but it's unusual.
But some of his responses to those arguments were also pretty outlandish, especially when it came to his dislike of abortion and discussing what would happen if your daughter was raped and pregnant, for example. The answers he gave were astonishing, and some of his views on, of course, gun law in America as well. Naturally, those kind of things are cropping up now.
And inevitably, but in a sense, you know, whether his views are your cup of tea or not is by the by. The point is that what he chose to do, what he spent his life doing, what he died doing, tragically, was choosing to go and engage not just with people who already agree with him, the kind of online echo chamber, but to engage explicitly with people who didn't. And I think that's an important thing to do. And unfortunately, we have seen this rise in political violence in the United States. There was a politician, their wife murdered in Minnesota, and another couple shot and wounded at the same time over the
attack on Nancy Pelosi and her husband.
But we're also seeing this. I mean, mercifully in our country, there are nowhere near as many guns around, but also seeing a rise in political violence here. We saw Sharon Hodgson MP's constituency office burned down in an arson attack yesterday, the second MP in 2 years that's happened to. You speak to politicians and parliamentarians and candidates, you hear the amount of death threats you get. I've been on this show with fellow reviewers who've received threatening messages for simply the act of saying, and it's about time, I think, we've allowed our morals to get uprooted on this. It's time to remind people words, incitement is one thing, but words you don't like are not an act of violence. Silence is not violence, despite what you see on the placards. This is violence, it's grotesque, and if it doesn't stop, we won't just lose lives, we'll lose the system we have. Democracy was invented as a way of settling our disagreements peacefully, and we could lose that very easily if we're not watchful.
Thank you for that point and that discussion about Charlie Kirk. Coming up, we will be discussing concerns about the assisted dying bill, which is being debated in the House of Lords tomorrow.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent, and I'm based here in Beijing.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Thank you. Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory, and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News, the full story first.
I'm Martin Brunt and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm David Blevins and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace. The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19, religion's nothing.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back to the press preview here on Sky News. Still with me in the studio, Mark Wallace and Baroness Grey-Thompson. Let's get straight back to the front of the Telegraph. A smaller story at the bottom, Tanni, but this I know is one you're very interested in. It's going to take up a lot of your time over the next couple of days. Their headline is Unjustified Powers in the Assisted Dying Bill, which is in the Lords tomorrow, well, in the Lords for the next couple of days. I know you've put your name forward to speak. What are your concerns about it?
So there are lots of gaps in this bill. So one of the things is there's little in the way of tests for coercion. If you look at, the doctor has to be reasonably assured that the patient is not being coerced. There's nothing in there about protecting people with learning disabilities or Down syndrome, about how that conversation is held. So there is allowed a proxy signature. So the ability for coercion, for people feeling a burden, there's lots and lots of gaps that are just not in the bill. So
a lot of the concerns, it seems, based on this reporting, is not necessarily about the philosophical point of view. It's about the legal, the law not being quite up to scratch. There's something called Henry VIII powers, which sounds, incredibly outdated. Yeah. What are they?
So it's all quite geeky. So what it allows is for the Secretary of State to have enormous power. And a lot of this bill asks for everything to be put in statutory instruments, which never comes back to Parliament. And it basically allows those statutory instruments to be just rewritten as many times as the Secretary of State wants. So, there could possibly be, quite an expansion from what we're talking. So, the sound bites are 2 doctors, settled wish, 6 months diagnosis. That's hard to ignore. Yeah. Nobody wants anybody to die in pain. But, even Michael Lord Forsyth, who is a supporter of assisted dying, has said this is not a great bill. Yeah. So, we've got 188 speakers over 2 days. Which would be a
record in the Lords.
Yeah. And very unusually, they're split in second reading over 2 days, this Friday, next Friday. They haven't technically recalled Parliament. What they've done is they've switched the recess dates. So it's going to be huge.
Because there will be people, Mark, who support this and want the law to be sound, want it to be watertight, of course, because of the potential risks that Tanni has spelled out there. And they will be feeling disenfranchised here. They thought it was going to be a thing. The Commons has sent it up to the Lords now. But it sounds like what Tanni's describing means perhaps the law there, the way this bill has been written, needs to be looked at again.
Yes, I'm one of those people. So I think that somebody should have the right, if with due protections done properly, if possible. I would like potentially, in the circumstance, the circumstance I hope doesn't come about, to have access to that right and to not feel, as some people have been, in a choice between a painful death they don't want to suffer or putting their loved ones in an impossible situation. But when you're changing the law in this way, when you're changing the status of medical personnel with regard to patients, you're changing the obligations in terms of preserving life. You're creating huge risks, as Tanni says, with failing to make any provision for how this is discussed with people with learning disabilities. For instance, when we know that there is a real slippery slope, that all the things that were said in Canada wouldn't happen, they're saying won't happen here, have happened in Canada. This bill is not just badly written, it's been done completely in the wrong way. The private members' bill process was the wrong route for it to go through. The scrutiny and the promises and the amendments and changes and edits that were made along the way were poorly founded, and it's not got any better. And I think those concerns from people who fear they will be put at risk by this have to be listened to. I simply don't think the bill's appropriate at all.
Let's turn our attention just finally to the front page of The Guardian. Before we get onto the story, I want to mention, I'm very pleased to say they give the new Spinal Tap film 4 stars. Spinal Tap 2, yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about that.
Not 11.
Should have got 11s. Oh, my, that's too good. They really missed a trick, that's too good. On a more serious note, Jair Bolsonaro has been convicted of plotting a coup in Brazil, Mark. This is something that's been bubbling on, well, pretty much ever since he lost power to Lula in Brazil. But now he's been convicted, I think, on 5 counts and could face an awful long time behind bars.
Yes, and actually there's a quote in here from one of the Supreme Court judges. Brazilian democracy was not shaken, it was in the way that Bolsonaro might have hoped. Unfortunately, Brazilian democracy has been looking pretty shaky for quite a long time. It's remarkable, if you think about the scale of the country, the scale of the economy, its booming power, that kind of BRICS, kind of economic surge and so on, its place in the world.
Yeah.
There's been a series of... The more people seem to get into power in Brazil and then go to jail for it, be jailed by their opponents, than not. And that can't be good for anyone.
Thank you both very much indeed for the time being. We'll hear more from you in the next hour, of course. But coming up next at Sky News, on Sky News at 11, as Lord Mandelson is sacked as US ambassador, Sky News reveals the security services had warned Number 10 about giving him the job. Another headache for Keir Starmer. Certainly seems to be the case in terms of what the papers are reporting. We'll be discussing those in the next hour, bringing you the headlines as well after this break.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I'm Deborah Hames, Sky's security and defence editor.
Should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.